Hey, what's going on, guys? Well, I want to give you an update video on this Razor-Lite EDC knife by Outdoor Edge. I had just reviewed this knife and I had some questions and some comments and stuff, so I also forgot to mention something which I feel is kind of important. When I do my knife reviews, they're very much off the cuff. You know, I turn the camera on, I grab the knife, there's a couple main facts that I have to remember, like the specifications, the weight, the length, materials used, stuff like that, blade steel. That's something that I have to just retain that information. But everything else, I don't go through a checklist of talking points. So what happens is I want to give a more real feel and not such a robotic feel to my knife review. So one knife review, I might be focusing a little bit more on jimping. Another one, I might be talking a little bit more about the pocket clip. Just whatever stands out with that particular knife. I don't go by, okay, talk about this, and this. Because, every review, it would just kind of get mundane, of course, just in my opinion. That's why I do these videos how I do them. But I did forget a comment that I wanted to make on this knife, and that is the fact that this knife has two parts to the blade. Obviously, being a removable blade, okay, we have the actual blade that's not sharp, and this is basically the housing, right? This is what opens and closes, but it houses the blade. Now, when you put the blade in, what you're creating, okay, is a two-piece blade, right? And what I didn't mention in the review here is that when I was cutting some of the cardboard, it would snag up a little bit. All right, guys, so I zoomed in here to explain this a little bit better. Essentially, this is a two-piece blade. So what's happening here is you have your edge, okay? So let's say you're cutting paper, whatever. It's going through your edge, it's being sliced, but as it's running across the blade, it's hitting this shelf. There's actually a little bit of a drop-off here, which is the thickness of the edge of the blade part, or the part that houses the blade. All right, so because this is very non-traditional, you could feel that. You could feel with your finger. And when you're cutting things, you do feel that drag. You normally don't have that. Even on a very thick knife that has a very steep grind to it, it still does not grab like this does grab. Okay, so that's something that I wanted to point out here, is there is literally like a shelf here. So when you're cutting through your medium, whatever you're cutting, you feel it rubbing, you feel a little bit more resistance. All right, so that's something I forgot to mention in the review. It's not a huge deal, but it's definitely worth mentioning. All right, so another thing people were asking, actually I had a couple people send messages about this, and they were asking if you could flick this out like a lot of other EDC knives. Because it's a lockback, they thought maybe the spring was too heavy to do that, but it's not. It's a fairly light spring tension on this, okay? So just like a lot of other knives, you could flick that out. Doesn't take any effort to do that. Of course, like I've given tips before with thumb studs to kind of build up pressure this way before, and then you can release it and it'll flick right out. So that answers that question. And the last thing I want to talk about, of course, were cut tests. Okay, there were some comments in the video as well as multiple messages. I had at least 10 different people send me messages asking why I didn't do a cut test. And just a couple of those people were just noticing that I don't really do paper cutting tests in knife reviews that much anymore. The reason is that when I do a knife review for you guys, at that point, I've used that knife. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have a factory edge on it anymore. I suppose when I first get a knife that's brand new, I could film just a cut test to show you what it looks like, out of the box, because some people are concerned with how sharp a blade is when it's brand new. When they get the thing, is it going to be sharp enough to slice through paper, or whatever their standard happens to be for sharpness, right? The people who are majorly concerned with how sharp the knife is usually know how to sharpen them themselves. The average person doesn't focus on that so much. But the reason I don't do consistent paper cutting tests is because it really is more entertainment than it is education. Okay, what I mean by that is, again, by the time I do a review on the knife, that edge is not going to be the same performance as you're going to get that knife. You know what I'm saying? I'm speaking from my experience of using the knife, but at that point it may be duller than factory. It may be sharper because I've stropped it up, or if I've sharpened it, whatever the case may be. So this is a unique knife in that I can replace the blade, even though this is used. I'm going to take this out and replace it with a brand new factory sealed blade. Okay, this is how they come, which is actually really nice. Another question that people are asking is, what do you do with the extra blades? How do you store them? You can't just leave them in your pocket. Well, in this packaging, you can leave this in your pocket. I wouldn't recommend it though. How I replied back was that, if you're using this for a job site, you leave it in your toolbox, leave it in your tool bag, leave it in the glove box in your truck or your car, so they're close by if you really need them. But obviously the idea is to make sure your blade's sharp before you go to work anyway. But yeah, you could put this right in your pocket. They are like shrink wrapped here, but they also have a plastic protective, case in addition to this packaging here. So like it's not going to poke through very easily. Okay, and it's not going to slice very easily either because of that double packaging here. And it is factory sealed. So Here's a new blade. There's a little bit of a cut right on top there. Okay, so you can rip it open. All right, so you see what I'm saying now with that secondary, you know, protective case. So even without that, you could leave this in your pocket. Again, I don't recommend it, but you know, it could be done. Or you can leave these in, you know, a desk drawer if you happen to have that type environment. We have an office and a desk. But anyway, so we have a brand new factory blade here. And we're gonna do a paper cutting test so you guys can see what it's like with a fresh blade. And you can see how that was, you know, taken off again with the button. Push the button, snaps right in. All right, it's not going anywhere. All right, so here's our paper cut test. Break this down into some smaller sheets here. All right, we'll start from the heel here. All right, move our way towards the center. And I'm not really slicing. I'm not utilizing the whole blade here. Okay, it's even better performance when you're slicing. I'm trying to do push cuts to show different parts of the edge. Okay. Get another square. And work in the middle. Try to work that tip a little bit. Now in this case, what I was saying before, paper is not going to matter because it's so thin. All right, but when you're cutting through, you know what I mean? Like you have no resistance at all. This is extremely thin, extremely sharp. But then when you're cutting a thicker material, when you get to that black portion of the blade, there is that step. You can see how the paper, you know, wants to veer off to a different direction. Again, when you're cutting something thicker, let's see. Hold on. Actually, I have a notebook here, so rip this off. All right, so we have some cardboard. All right. You can see the knife is very sharp. I mean, it's a razor blade. It's literally a brand new razor blade, but this is also a thinner razor blade than you're going to get in a utility knife. And that's what a lot of people were saying too, is that, you know, what's the point of this? Just get a utility knife that, you know, the blades are easily accessible, they're cheaper, blah, blah, blah. But you do get different performance on this. These are thinner than a standard utility knife blade, okay? But when I'm cutting in here, I could feel very slight resistance where it's hitting the black portion of that blade. All right, now this cardboard is thin. Okay, the cardboard I was cutting for testing and stuff was a little bit thicker. It's just, you know, regular box, double ply, you know, cardboard box material. And I could feel that a little bit more. And you can see how thin these pieces are. I mean, you know, it's sharp. It's a sharp knife. A little more paper cutting. Paper slicing. So there you go, guys. The paper cutting tests are definitely much more entertainment than education, but hey, you know what? You're not just here for education. You want to be entertained too, so I get that. So I'll probably incorporate that a little bit more in the future, but when it makes sense, when I have a knife that's brand new out of the box, maybe I'll film just some cutting with it real quick before and kind of integrate that later into the review once the knife you know, has been used and ready to be reviewed. But yeah, there you go. Pretty cool. Like I said, it's not for everyone, and in reading the comments, a lot of people did just say, I don't really see the point, just get a regular utility knife, and, you know, I understand it's not for everyone, but it is what it is, you know what I'm saying? I like it, but it's not going to replace any of my knives, let's put it that way. So, hopefully you enjoyed the quick little updates, and hopefully that answered any other questions you may have had about this knife. So thank you very much for watching, guys. Hope you have an awesome day, and I will see you soon. Take care.